Maybe the best thing to do today would be to try to imagine the scene. The scene depicted in our gospel reading, the wedding at Cana. Weddings at the time of Jesus were great feasts, wonderful celebrations, sometimes lasting for days. There was food and wine and music and dancing and more food and more wine. And so try to imagine that. Picture a sun-drenched day in Palestine. The buildings of a small village shimmer in the afternoon sunlight, where the dusty path through the village widens to form something of a square. Villagers are gathered. Tables of food and large jugs of wine beckon the guests. Little children are playing in the street, pretending that they are having a wedding of their own. Other children are running about, chasing one another between the guests, laughing and shouting. For once, their parents and the guests don't seem to mind. An old man sits off to one side asleep, his chin resting on his chest. The wine and the sun just too much for him. Two old ladies sit nearby, nattering, as their critical eyes keep watch over the festivities. They look at the old man and shake their heads with disapproval. Then their eyes return to the party, and something sets them to gossiping once more. 5 or 6 young men stand clumped together eyeing the village beauties, who are also clumped together a little way away. The young girls giggle nervously, knowing that the young men are staring at them, talking about them. One of them suddenly shrieks with shock at something another girl says, and they all cover their mouths with their hands, trying to muffle their laughter. The bride and the groom move among the guests, greeting and thanking them, and they look so very, very young. The bride appears shy and often averts her eyes when the villagers speak to her, but the groom fairly prances about, giddy with joy and anticipation. The parents of the bride circulate as well. They too are bursting with pride and smile broadly as they greet their friends and neighbors. The caterer approaches the father of the bride and whispers something in his ear, and the father excuses himself from his wife and guests to step away and consult with the caterer. As the caterer talks, the father gets a worried look on his face. A middle-aged woman notices and asks the father what has happened. When the father tells her, she too looks worried. Then the three of them hurry away. The other guests do not notice, however, and the music and dancing continue on amidst the laughing and gossiping and sleeping and playing and eating and drinking and the just dazzling beauty of the day. Try to imagine a sun-drenched party such as that. And now try to imagine Jesus and his disciples joining such a party. Or is that too much to imagine? Is it too much to imagine Jesus attending the wedding of family and friends, old neighbors? Is it too much to imagine Jesus even having friends and neighbors, being clapped on the back as he arrives, being greeted by friends? Jesus himself greeting friends, taking some cheese and bread from the table, filling a cup of wine and drinking a toast in honor of the bride and groom. Or his disciples dancing, Jesus himself dancing, all of them laughing and enjoying the party. We sometimes make Jesus so otherworldly, so spiritual, so non-human, that it is hard to imagine such a thing. And yet there he was, along with Mary, his mother. And it was Mary who noticed the worry on the face of the father of the bride, an old friend. A very awkward situation had arisen. The wine had run out. The party would be ruined, and an old friend, deeply embarrassed, in front of his guests. Mary did not want that for her friend, and so when she saw her son, she decided that he should do something about it. So she said to Jesus, The wine has run out. Just that. And you know, mothers are like that. Often mothers do not directly ask a son to do something. They often just make an observation about something. But the son knows what the mother is really saying and what his mother expects him to do. When I was a teenager, it was my job every spring to paint the concrete patio at the back of our house. It was my mother's idea to paint the patio every year. No one else in the family thought it was necessary. But my mother did, and every year it was painted. I painted it. But never once did my mother ask me to paint. We'd be sitting on the patio enjoying a cool Minnesota spring, when out of the blue my mother would look at the floor and say, they certainly don't make patio paint to last very long, do they? And even though I knew that it was over right then and there, I would say, oh, I don't know, Mom, it looks pretty good to me. It'll go another year or two at least, for sure. And my mother said, well, you're probably right. And anyway, I doubt if anyone would notice the bubbles. And I would say, but Mom, I've got a lot of important stuff to do this weekend. And she would say, I understand. And then turn to my father and say, Judd, let's pick up some good patio paint on the way home from work tomorrow. And Saturday morning, I would paint the patio with my mother sitting on a chair on the grass, offering encouragement and pointing out all the spots I had missed. The wine has run out. They certainly don't make patio paint to last very long, do they? And like I did and most sons do, Jesus protested. More than protested. He bristled at Mary's suggestion that he use his power to keep a party going. His ministry was just beginning. And maybe he imagined moments far more dramatic than a village wedding in which to display his power. Or maybe he thought it was a misuse of his power, just to make wine for a wedding. Or maybe he bristled because he thought his mother, well, just didn't understand him. Didn't understand who he was, what his mission was all about, what he was all about. But here again, mothers are like that. They can full well understand how important and powerful a son is. But if he won't help out a friend, use his power or influence to do some simple thing for a friend, then a mother wonders, well, what good's his power or influence? And also, it's a good way to keep his mother's feet, her son's feet, on the ground. So Mary said, they have no wine. And Jesus bristled and said, has nothing to do with him. And now picture Mary looking at her son for a brief moment, raising one eyebrow, then turning away as if she hadn't heard a word. Picture Mary turning toward the waiters and saying, do whatever he tells you, and giving them a little smile and confident nod. Then turning back to Jesus and looking at him and patting him on the arm and walking away. And mothers have a way of doing that as well, acting as if they haven't heard a word of a son's protest, walking away, knowing that what she wants done will be done. And I have to believe that Jesus stood there stunned for a brief moment. Not sure if he should go after his mother and flat out refuse to do what she wanted. Or maybe he was frustrated, angry even. But he knew his mother well. And besides, this wasn't the first time she had prodded him into doing what she wanted. He knew it was pointless to protest further. So he said to the waiters, fill the jars with water. And that's what we're finally to imagine. Jesus working a miracle, changing water into wine, making an abundance of wine, the very best wine, putting the life back into the party, keeping the joy alive, giving life and joy to a young couple and a small village on a sun-drenched day in Palestine. Of course, John tells us, the readers, Oh, that there was a lot more going on than that. That the miracle was what John called a sign. And it was something that points beyond itself to a deeper level of reality and meaning. Now, science says there's more going on than we realize. And for John, what was going on, that Jesus was replacing the old relationship with God based on Jewish law and ritual with a new relationship centered in him. That Jesus himself was the new wine. And to believe in him, drink in him, is to have a new life-giving relationship with God. And that's what John, that's how he wants us to read the story. But frankly, I have to agree with Mary. What good is such power if it isn't used to help a friend? If it isn't experienced in our day-to-day lives amidst all the ordinary going on in our life? If it doesn't help us in our relationships, our working, our retiring, and all the rest? And really, I think that's exactly what the story is saying. Whether John intends it that way or not, that there is a lot more going on each day right in front of our eyes than we realize. Miracles of life and joy in the most ordinary things and days. We are surrounded by things meant to point us to the presence of God, if only we had eyes to see. And I think more than anything, that's what we need to realize. In his novel, Franny and Zooey, published many, many years ago now, J.D. Salinger tells the story of a screwball family in New York named Glass. For all their craziness, they are still a family who love each other. Franny, one of the daughters in the family, comes home from college in a kind of nervous breakdown. Everything has become too much for her. She's been on a pilgrimage of sorts, a religious, mystical journey in her mind, searching for certainty, God, a guru, a guide, someone to teach her the true religious way. But she's come home empty, exhausted, confused, withdrawn. She lies down on the living room sofa and remains there, refusing to eat or drink, refusing any comfort or conversation. Her mother, Bessie, is deeply worried about her. Her daughter hasn't eaten in 24 hours. She is lifeless and spent. And so Bessie wonders, what does Franny need? Well, what Franny needs, Bessie concludes, is a nice cup of hot chicken soup. So every 5 minutes, Bessie brings Franny a nice cup of hot chicken soup. But each time, Franny refuses it. But Bessie continues to offer it. Bessie drives Franny nuts with her offers of chicken soup. But Franny knows, even though she won't admit it, that Bessie offers the soup in love and wants to help. But still, Franny only pretends to sample it. She won't even take one sip. Finally, her brother Zooey, who has tried to talk with her, reads her the riot act. He tells her that her religion, the whole business of her searching for mystical perfection and meaning, is all wet. If it's the religious life you want, he tells her, you ought to know right now that you're missing out on every single religious action that's going on around this house. You don't even have enough sense to drink when somebody brings you a cup of consecrated chicken soup, which is the only kind of chicken soup Bessie ever brings to anyone around this madhouse. So just tell me, buddy, if you went out and searched the whole world for a master, some guru, some holy man, to tell you how to say your Jesus prayer properly, what good would it do you? How are you going to recognize a legitimate holy man when you see one, if you don't even recognize a cup of consecrated chicken soup when it's right in front of your nose? And I like that. Consecrated chicken soup. And consecrated hugs and words and smiles and so much else right in front of our noses. And all of them having the power to work the miracle of life. And it's what our faith is all about. The fancy word for it's incarnation, which means God not above it all, apart from all, but right here in the midst midst of it all, taking on human form. This is the God who was found in a stable, who was seen in a man from a village called Nazareth, a man who sat with outcasts and had lunch with people that religious people wouldn't be caught dead with, who used just ordinary bread and wine to work the miracle of forgiveness and life, who cried out in despair on a cross, who fixed a nice breakfast for his disciples following his resurrection, and then had a bite himself. If it tells us anything, it tells us God will be found in chicken soup and tender hugs and days so bright they dazzle the heart with their beauty. And the miracle he is working is the miracle of abundant life right in front of our noses. So imagine that. Just imagine a sun-drenched day, friends and neighbors and bread and wine and laughing and dancing, and Jesus there, and you and I there too, and life so good, so very good, that you cannot help but laugh and dance yourself because of the wonder and the miracle of it all. Amen.